Welcome, my sober lovelies. It's Rewired Sober. I'm your host, Kate Vitela. We are back with another solo episode. We and solo. I've been on a solo episode kick, and I probably will be for a little while here because I just have a lot to say. And this podcast was actually not really intended to have a lot of guests. So here we go. And oh my gosh, I do have to caveat my little apologies for the audio. I recently listened to some episodes back and I was so disappointed. Like the audio was so bad. There was a really quiet intro and then a really loud body, and I'm doing the best I can. I sort of have it and then I don't have it. But the theme of this episode and of my life is to just take messy action and to not overthink everything, because then I would never do anything. I would sit in my perfectionism and fear and never start. So here we go. Now, this episode, I'm going to talk about fashion and recovery. And before you skip on, if you're not a fashion lover, there's actually a lot of extra stuff in here about sobriety and courage and following the breadcrumbs of your dreams. Cheesy, I know. Yeah, I'll give you some fucking Velveeta, but here we go. Okay, so every year, the first Monday in May, the fashion world gathers in New York for the Met Gala. It's this extravagant, big red carpet event. I'm sure you see it all over social media and the news. It's beautiful. It's art, sometimes weird. It's a lot of storytelling through fabric and risk and identity. And it's become a who's who of celebrity, but it's to raise money for the Fashion Institute. And it's also just a beautiful red carpet. If you've ever been to the actual Met, the steps are pretty long and extensive. So the red carpet goes all the way up. And what I love most about the Met Gala is catching the snippet interviews and everyone talking about what designers they're wearing. And okay, whatever. This year, my big announcement is I'm not invited to the Met Gala. I'm kidding. I'm not going to be on that red carpet. No, but my big announcement is I am doing something that feels really cool and really aligned. I am starting the Vitela Runway project, and this is going to be a nonprofit entity merging fashion and mental health and recovery local to the Pacific Northwest for creative designers, models, makeup artists, etc. This will be essentially to raise money for initiatives and facilities and services in the Pacific Northwest, like the Methadone Clinic here in Olympia for harm reduction, or Interfaith Works, which is a shelter and recovery space, or the women's shelter. And so these will be runway shows here in the very cool eclectic city of Olympia, where we don't have a lot going on, but we have this massive creative population here. It's the capital city of Washington. It's actually very beautiful. A lot of it is waterfront. And I think that there's just a lot of creative talent here. It's also home to Evergreen State College, which is one of the biggest liberal arts colleges in the US, and people come from all over to attend. And so I will tap some liberal arts students and probably hair and makeup students, and I have a lot of big ideas. So I'm really, really excited. I just launched an Instagram for it. It will be my husband and I doing it together. He's also sober. He's a 20-year Army veteran who's also struggled with his own mental health issues. We are really, really excited. So I hope you support us on the journey. And what's interesting is I used to drink myself into somewhat of invisibility, and now I'm building something out loud, another something, right? With my sober partner, with creativity, with purpose, and I'm really excited. So this year at the Met Gala, the theme and the exhibition will be costume art focused on the dressed body, highlighting a lot of works of Jean Paul Gaultier, which I'm a very, very big fan of. Co-chairs are Venus Williams, Beyonce, Nicole Kidman, of course, Anna Wintour. So really excited for that. And this episode's actually dropping the first Tuesday in May, right after that Met Gala. And I love the symbolism of that. So I thought, why not? Let's go for it. And the whole world will probably be watching these celebrities interpret this theme, fashion of art. But, so actually some people are kind of boycotting it because there's a lot of talk about Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's involvement, and that makes people kind of cringe. But either way, it's been a beautiful exhibition of fashion every year. I'll actually be in New York on May 15th. I'll be attending Kim Bellis's Sober is the New Cool's White Party at the Maze, which is New York's first exclusive sober and social club. It is in the Flatiron District, and it's really the first only alcohol-free social club there. So I'm really excited to check that out. There'll be lots of other internet friends, podcasters, influencers, brand ambassadors, and we're all going to join in all white clothing. And it's just a really cool thing. So I'm also going to go to see the fashion exhibit, like I always do at the Met. And I already know this year I'm going to walk through the space differently than last year because I bring a different version of me as I grow and evolve. I'm going to walk through that space differently than I maybe would have last year, a few years ago. And I feel really integrated into this fashion world, albeit all in my fantasy. But because I've done so much participation and I've spent so much time studying fashion and getting involved in the discourse and the networking and the friendships I've made and the investment I've made in this creative industry in terms of my time and my reverence. And I've just made a lot of friends in the local scene between the Seattle and Portland areas where I live. And fashion means a lot to all of us. So I'm excited to, bring everybody in on the vision. And of course, I go to New York a couple times a year. It's always been a big part of my love for fashion and then of the melding of my sobriety, if you've listened to previous episodes. And it just kind of helped me bring together the idea of the Vitela Runway project. As I've talked about, I was involved from about 2022, maybe 2021. I can't remember. It's been the last 4 or 5 years I've been involved with the Break Free Runway show in New York. And that is a nonprofit entity that raises money for addiction and mental health causes in the New York area. And of course, it's a big, giant show, lots of creatives. The creative director, Alexandra Nyman, actually has her own brand called Lady Cat, and she's working to get the whole show on the CFDA calendar, which is huge. And when I came home from New York this year, after I celebrated 8 years of sobriety, I messaged Alexandra, who's become a friend of mine over the years, and I said, what about my husband Philip and I starting a Break Free in the Pacific Northwest, sort of like an offshoot of Break Free New York? And because my husband does some fashion photography, he's done quite a bit of runway photography, actually. It's something we'd both be interested in. And she didn't respond because she was super busy working on some political campaigns. I mean, she eventually responded, but in the time it took her to respond, which was a few weeks because I think the text got lost or whatever, you know how that happens. It gave me time to think. And it's one of those God shots where I was like, wow, thank God I didn't get what I thought I wanted, which was an immediate response, an immediate text back saying, yes, here's the blueprint and the template to exactly replicate what I've done in New York. And as I was thinking about it, I came upon this like, no, I really want to do this on my own. I want to build this from the ground up with my husband here locally. And maybe it's tied to local initiatives. There's different laws in Washington. There's different charities. And we're certainly really well integrated into the community. So the idea for the Vitela Runway project was born. Well, but I didn't want to overlap. So I felt like, honestly, this whole plot twist deserved its own episode. And I was talking to Chris Marshall, who is the owner of the Sands Bar and the Sands Bar Academy. He helps people set up mocktail bars and non-alcoholic bottle shops. And he was really kind of the pioneer in this. He was a bartender prior to getting sober. He's been part of Laura McCowan's The Luckiest Club, and he's just been a big champion in the non-alcoholic space. And he recently had posted he was going to do a runway show. And so we set up a phone call, and he was like, I have a new project, like I'm not busy enough. Now, after we talked for a while, it's probably not going to be an actual fashion runway show, but we had this conversation where we were like, yeah, same. Like, I have a lot going on, like way too many things going on. And yet here I am starting another thing. But it's so fun. And what I said to Chris was like, what else would we be doing with our time? We have so many ideas. You know, sobriety is such a wild ride, and there's a flood of creative ideas and things that maybe we didn't do because we were drinking. And so it's like reawakening all that. And I don't think we talk about that enough. You know, you get sober and you think at the time you're signing up for this small, safe, like more controlled life. I thought I was signing up for complete banality, boring, mundane. I was going to be wearing nun's clothing and sitting in a library. I mean, I was really thinking like, it's over. Everything is over. My social life is over. This fun version of me is over. My sisters used to call me Hollywood. I'm like, all of it's over. It's done. I have to get sober. I thought of the word sober as like a synonym to somber. And I couldn't have been more wrong about what sobriety has brought to my life. Like, okay, you remove the chaos, you know, you drink your sparkling water, you go to bed early. Yes. But it also like blows your life wide open because you feel everything and you notice everything. And I feel like I started wanting things again. And it was a little inconvenient in the beginning because now I actually had the capacity to do something about it. And it was like, there's nothing stopping me from chasing my dreams. No more excuses. And what also really got me was that sobriety gave me fragments back of my old self, yes. But to my surprise, it really gave me a completely different life. And it was a little disorienting at first, right? Because I was like, well, who am I now if I'm not Hollywood, if I'm not that version of me who copped this way and secretly kind of stayed small and performed. But if you stay on your sober journey, like I have, if you don't run, this is where things in your life really start to open up. And something that I like to talk about is when you've been through something like sobriety, getting sober, a really tough life situation, a mental health journey, overcoming something, rock bottom does something to you. Or even the overcoming, you know, whatever your version of rock bottom is, it strips you down. It humbles you. It removes the curated version of you. And what's left of you is real. And I feel like the real version of me didn't have the same fears as the old version. I became fearless in a sense, not like in a loud performative way, but more in a grounded way. And, you know, you've already survived the worst thing you thought could happen, right? I survived my darkest days, just like that old cliche saying. And there was a part of me that was like, what the fuck am I actually afraid of now? What could possibly happen to me now after I have climbed out of the darkness? You know, there's so many beautiful quotes about this on the internet. One being, I didn't crawl through the shards of my own brokenness, of a broken life to live in the ordinary. I've prepared for magic. I've prepared to do the things my wildest dreams, right? Because what am I afraid of? Judgment, of looking stupid? Well, I wouldn't have started this podcast. Am I afraid of being misunderstood? Like, I think I'm a supermodel. I think I'm Christy Turlington, or I think I'm Anna Wintour, a big creative director. No, I'm not even afraid of being misunderstood. I think once you've burned your life down, you stop being afraid of lighting a little tiny match. You know, that sounds like a cliched saying, but I burnt my life to the ground and every aspect of my identity, even the things that I was the most proud of, I either lost or almost lost. And so what emerges is the version of me that's not afraid anymore. I was at a book signing, when Laura McKowen released her second book after We Are the Luckiest. It's called Push Off From Here. And this was in downtown Portland. And I want to say it was around 2020, 21, because Portland hadn't even opened back up yet. There was lots of streets that were boarded off. Portland really took a hit during the pandemic. But I remember showing up to this event. Emily Lynn Paulson was there. She's the author of Hey Hun, and she also has led sobriety groups. Anyway, Chris Marshall was there. Oh, funny story. When I was at that party, I thought I was wearing this really cool outfit. I got to find the picture. I was wearing this like blue blazer and I had these giant gold earrings on that said Kate, sort of like in the sort of gangster aesthetic, like very mob wife, just giant gold. I thought the earrings were funny. They were kitsch. They were loud. And one of the staff members at the venue was a younger man, and he came up to me and he was dead serious and his eyes were wide, like he had just, there was a celebrity spotting. And he said, "Are you that woman from the show The Mob Wives?" And I laughed because I was like, no. Just because I'm wearing giant fake eyelashes, giant fake nails, giant fake boobs, giant fake earrings, giant fake hair. And then I was like, oh, wait, well, I'm a little bit mob wife. Like that's an aesthetic I've always loved. But anyway, I'll never forget that party. That was funny. But Chris Marshall from the Sands Bar was there. And after Laura McKowen talked about her book a little bit, he got up and spoke. And he said, I had this inkling of an idea to start the Sands Bar, but I really didn't know where it was going to go or how I was going to do it or how it was going to get started. And he said, Laura told him to follow the breadcrumbs. And that's some of the best advice I have taken with me throughout my entrepreneurial journey and my sober journey, my coaching business, this podcast. Follow the breadcrumbs and take messy action. And I've done that in relationships, meeting new people in the sober space, jumping on other people's podcasts, picking up new books. And I've mentioned this before. When it comes to early sobriety, sometimes I tell people, follow the breadcrumbs, because a podcast is going to lead you to a new thought leader, which may lead you to a new book, which may lead you to a trip or a book signing. And then you meet a friend, and then you find a new podcast, and then you get interested in a new personal development space. And somehow the pieces of your life start to come together, and you start to come together. And there really is no one set path for anyone in recovery. She Recovers uses the term patchwork of recovery, and it really is that. And a lot of it is following the breadcrumbs. And I've done that in sobriety and in entrepreneurship. And I can't say enough about that little silent trust of just one breadcrumb after the other, after the other. And so to shift gears, and since I'm talking about fashion, one thing I really wanted to point out here is that when people hear fashion and runway, I think a lot of people instantly go to, well, you have to be, 5'11" and 80 pounds to be a runway model, and you have to be 19 and gorgeously beautiful and perfect. What I really want to do with the Vitela Runway project is emphasize body neutrality and the power of body diversity. Having a diverse cast of models on the runway is really important to me, because what can be damaging to your mental health in the fashion and modeling industry are these very, very strict standards. The heroin chic, super skinny, Ozempic era, that we're in right now can be really damaging. And it's exhausting to look around and be constantly comparing your body to others. And I don't want this these shows or this space to encourage that at all. I've certainly talked a lot on this podcast about my own struggles with disordered eating and body image, and I don't want any of this to contribute to that. I want this to be an opportunity for women and men of all shapes and sizes, of all gender identities, of all colors, to walk the runway and to be celebrated for the diversity. Because even someone in their 40s like me who had really recovered in a lot of ways from my disordered eating, I wasn't actively restricting or actively in bulimia anymore. When I got into modeling and I started seeing, wow, I'm gonna have to put a bathing suit on and all these girls are very young and thin, there was this piece of me that instantly felt like, oh, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I got to lose weight. I got to do all these things to my body. I got to hurry up and get a facelift. I look like shit. It was like this instant comparison. And I don't want this to be like that, because I think you miss the point of community and fashion and creativity and how empowering fashion can be. You miss the point when you focus on having waif thin models and a body standard that's absolutely ridiculous. So, and I want to say something here specifically to the midlife woman, because in terms of body neutrality, like no one prepares us for this part, but there is a reckless abandon that starts to emerge, and not in a self-destructive way, but in a self-trusting way. And you stop negotiating with every room you walk into, and you stop asking, do they like me? Am I good enough? Is my body good enough? And you start asking, do I like this? And your body becomes part of that shift, because for years, our bodies were projects to fix, shrink, control. And this is the time in our lives when a lot changes. And I feel personally that I become a lot more neutral, not perfect, not always love, but my body is no longer a battleground. And I feel like when you stop obsessing over your body, you get your energy back for creativity, for life, for your voice. And that's where power comes from. And I can honestly say in my late 40s is the most powerful I've ever felt in my life, not in my 20s, now. Because now it's real. Like I'm the fucking real deal. I'm a midlife woman. Take it as it is. This is me now. Okay, my TED Talk is over. I'm going to pivot into another reason I'm obsessed with fashion, and that is the psychology and the creativity pieces of it. Now, when you're not numbing out, you got to put your energy somewhere. And obviously, a lot of us used alcohol as escapism. And so without drinking, it's not that I don't want to stop escaping in some ways. I just start escaping into things that expand me. And I hope that you have found artistic and creative ways to do the same. Art, style, creativity. This love for fashion was a big shift for me. You know, I used to really dress for approval. I was hustling to chase trends. And I feel really, truly like I dress now for self-expression, to tell a story. What does this outfit feel like to me? What do I want to say? What story am I trying to tell? And there's a real psychology here. There's dopamine, there's identity, there's dopamine dressing, there's mood, and it's very healing. I love the saying when it comes to fashion, expression replaces suppression. So what if it's kind of an escape, you know? I mean, it's healing. I was talking to a local designer here in Olympia. His name is Calvin Douglas, and he put out a collection recently that I stumbled on, and it's kind of, I think, a bit of deconstruction, sort of punk, leaning toward a nod to Raf Simons, but also kind of couture-like, and you can tell he spent a lot of time sewing these pieces in their individual. Anyway, immediately fell in love with the collection and reached out to him. We were at a fashion show watch party, and he was talking about releasing his menswear line during the summer when it would line up with, the global couture shows. And he said, well, no one is going to know that it's during couture, but I will know. And I immediately knew what he was talking about. You will know, like, that's important to you. There's an internal validation here. It's like casting a little tiny vote for yourself. I'm on my own team here. And as a person who loves fashion, I knew exactly what he was talking about. You will know deep down, I did this. I put this out into the world and I've got my own back and I can trust myself, is what that felt like to me. Even if you're going to be a little cunty and cheeky about it, like I'm loving every expression as it comes. Bring it on. Now, we still have to talk about stigma. And the reason why that I'm big on starting this project and having these conversations is that there is still massive, massive fucking stigma for mental health issues and addiction. So we got to talk about it. And I know it's cliche, but it's still really massive. I think we've just gotten a little better at hiding it. You know, people will talk about anything else except the fact that they are personally struggling. But what if in certain spaces we just told the fucking truth, like even in small ways? Even when I sit with someone and they say, you know, I have a lot of anxiety and I just drink more than I want, or yeah, I get depressed sometimes, or, you know, I just need something to get me through this. There's a connection that starts there. I see this play out in real time. You know, one of my favorite sayings is we live in a society that loves drugs and alcohol, but fucking hates addicts and alcoholics. So how do we smash that stigma? And every time I'm at a fashion event and someone asks what I do, and I say, you know, I'm a psychiatric nurse, I'm a sobriety coach, I have a podcast, there's this pause and this little bit of confusion and then curiosity and a little bit of polite discomfort. It's almost like I told them that I rescue dung beetles in my free time from getting squashed into oblivion. And I think they see this version of me that is into fashion, and I'm tattooed and I'm loving style. I'm very creative. I'm gregarious. And then I'm talking about how I'm a sobriety coach, and I'm probably the loudest one in the room, the one that's laughing the hardest, partying the hardest, having the most fun. And it's like, ooh, that's all a weird picture that isn't supposed to overlap. Like, how can you be a fashion loving party animal girl and also this other piece of you that's into addiction science and helping others and not afraid to fucking talk about it? And every time after the pause, I see people lean in a little because I feel like it gives them permission. This exists everywhere, not just in fashion. And so I want to have these conversations. And my experience at Break Free in New York is just by entering the room, even if the makeup artist has no desire to be sober, right? You don't have to be sober to participate. You just have to want to support and be an ally. Even if the designer has had some minor struggles with mental health, but still smokes weed, whatever the case, like whatever your correlation to the sober life and mental health, no matter what, you resonate somewhere. And the conversations open up and we are talking about these things backstage. And I've even been to Runway shows where for Break Free, where she handed out Narcan test strips. Yeah, we're going to fucking talk about this because people are dying everywhere. And I really appreciated that realness. You know, if we talk about the fashion industry, it's no surprise that we have major celebrity creatives that have really struggled with their mental health and addiction. Like, just to name a few: Marc Jacobs, Tom Ford, John Galliano, and the countless other people we don't see. So it's all of us, you know, and it's no secret that a lot of designers and creatives in the industry are part of the LGBTQ community. And what we know about that is they're nearly twice as likely to suffer from substance use disorder. There is a 20 to 30% misuse in substance compared to the general population. You know, they're facing a lot more marginalization and stigma, and they're coming to recovery at the intersection of additional challenges. So I really want to support that population. And this is a large part of the fashion industry. So these are things we got to fucking talk about, right? So I really want to pull in the community. I saw this with the Break Free Showcase again in New York. Recovery on the Runway We all came together every year as models, designers, creatives, and I just couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unfeel that power. And so I'm following it and I'm going to build something like it. And it's not going to be perfect. I'm just now applying for all of the tax credits to be a nonprofit, and we're brainstorming ideas of local entities we can contribute to and starting to have these conversations. But I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs. One small idea, one conversation, and now we're building something, and it will be recovery and fashion and creativity with real humans, not just supermodels, really people who decided to come back to life. There was this feeling when I walked the runway the first time for Break Free, like total fucking redemption. And I have this core memory of being with Denny Carice backstage. She's a clinical psychologist. At the time, she was working as a high-ranking individual for Recovery Centers of America. I don't think she's there anymore, but Denny was talking backstage about how she had a modeling career when she was younger. And in her words, she sort of screwed it up. She threw it away because of her drinking and using, and she missed her opportunity to really capitalize on the modeling during the time when she was big. And she said, when I'm walking down this runway today, it's like saying a fuck you to my addiction. And that gave me chills backstage, and it has stuck with me ever since. So shout out, Denny, if you're listening, I'd love to have you on the pod. So here's what I believe now. Overall, life is meant to be experienced, right? Not just managed. Sobriety didn't shrink my life. It made it so fucking limitless. And if you're in this space and you've wondered like, oh my God, I quit drinking, now what? This is your now what? No, not my project individual, but your life. Your project is your life, and that is your now what. So follow the breadcrumbs. Corny, cheesy, I don't care. Do what scares you a little bit, what makes you curious. You don't need a 5-year plan. Look at me, just podcasting away. So here we are. If you want to follow along on the journey, you can find us on Instagram at the Vitela Runway Project. Especially if you are interested, if you're a hair and makeup artist, a creative, a model, and a mocktail brand, a designer, DJ, photographer, whatever. You have an awesome venue. Let's do this together. I think this is absolutely going to be a wild ride, and I'm super excited.